Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good your time zone compared to mine. I hope everyone is doing good. Today is our weekly cooking stream. Um, I'm a little congested, so I apologize beforehand that I'm probably going to have to pause and get water every once in a while because I don't want to keep coughing at you. But past that, yeah, today we're doing a nice nude stream. We have 5 fun little recipes, all noodle based, obviously. Um, they are, sorry. They are ranging from stuff that is nice fancy date things, nice homey feels. You can adapt them to be fancier or more home style. The way I cooked mine was for meal prep, so I did between 4 and 6 servings, which kind of changed how I had to do it a little bit. I used like a big pot instead of a nice pan and just stuff like that. But past that, it's really all adaptable. You can make it how you the size that you want. So if you want to be fancy in front of someone, you can do that. If you want to be fancy for a little double date night, you can do it that way. If you just want to make a nice thing of quick noodles for family, then you can go with that too. So with that, we're going to jump right into it. The first recipe that we're going to be doing, whoa, that was fun, is a mushroom pasta. So we have all of our stuff. Ignore that in the back. That's for something else next week. Our pans are hot, and we start with a little bit of oil. Get that lubrication. Um, I like using, even if I'm going to cook in butter, I always put oil. I've said it a couple times before, but again, I'm not going to assume anyone's cooking experience or level. But if you put oil in a pan and then butter, your butter will not burn as fast. It will burn eventually if you kind of just let it go, but if you treat it appropriately, you'll be fine. But if you just put butter in there and let it cook, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to burn. So at least if you're not paying attention, like all the little factors with it. But if you put oil, you can be a little more irresponsible with your heat application. Um, I like white mushrooms. You know, you can use the Baby Bella. It'll probably be a little bit, I don't want to say tastier, but a different flavor. I mean, it's a different mushroom. This is I want to say this is a pound of mushrooms. Pretty sure it is. And I just dumped it in with a little bit of oil in a hot pan, and then got my skillet nice and hot. That chicken that I'm about to cook is seasoned with a nice house seasoning. It's the same seasoning that I put into the sauce. So if you're just using salt and pepper, you can season with salt and pepper. It won't be an issue. I just wanted to have a similar flavor across the two, just because that's how I cook. That's the best way I can word it. Is I really like the seasoning. This particular sauce that I'm making is a modification of a steak sauce that I like to make, where I do a cream sauce with mushrooms and then serve it with steak, and the seasoning that I put in the chicken is the same seasoning I would normally put on the steak for this sauce. It's a seasonal. It's kind of the best way to describe it. I put it on everything. I know I've talked about it in the past. It's a salty cumin type flavor that has a bit of it has like marjoram and oregano and cumin and coriander, but the notes that come through are salt, pepper, and cumin. Everything else brings those up. So if you wanted to imitate what I'm trying to do, then I would recommend doing a salt, pepper, and cumin base, and that'll kind of get you a similar profile, which is really good on chicken, and surprisingly enough, a lot of other things. Um, If you wanted to save the step from what I'm doing, you can either run a knife through the mushrooms, you can just aggressively crumble it, really. Mushrooms are like styrofoam almost in how they break. Um, but right now there's only oil in there to get it started, and once the mushrooms kind of get wet and start cooking down, I then add the butter. Again, you can add it all at once, but the amount of fat that you put in kind of has to correlate. You want to, how to word it? You're basically making a roux um, at a certain point in this. So the amount of fat that you put in is going to correlate to the amount of flour that you're putting in, which will then relate to the amount of liquid that you can put in without it being too watery or too thick. Um, if it doesn't thicken up enough, you can add more flour once it's all cooking and use that to thicken it. But it's once you get used to cooking certain recipes, you kind of get a feel for everything. So because I'm cooking this particular way the first time doing this, it is a little different. So I ended up adding flour to everything once it got going to kind of thicken it up more, because I cooked it differently, you know. But the main thickening for this is flour, which is very unusual for me. I normally, yeah, a little puppy break. Hey, Noodle. What are you doing? Your little face. Oh, poor Noodle. I love that puppy. Anyway, sorry. Oh, hey, there's a dog in here. Hey, Lexi. How you doing? She just looked at me and then laid right back down. Anyway, um, so this recipe again, a play on a steak sauce. It's a basic milk and flour roux style with mushrooms, and to kind of change it up a bit, I normally don't cook with breast meat. I like thigh meat. I kind of like the fattier, darker meat. But, you know, if you can't buy it, you can't cook with it. And for whatever reason, all of the stores around me only have breast meat. So that's what I cooked. It's just seasoned, a little bit of oil right into the pan, and I'm kind of just cooking it to get a nice color and cook it through. Because the chicken is going into a hot sauce at the end, you could just throw it in raw and cook it into it, and it really wouldn't be an issue. I just like that char, you know? It's just that little bit of extra. But if you wanted to use less pans, you could just slice the chicken and add it to the hot sauce, all the liquid, and just let that cook it. It will be perfectly fine. But mushrooms cooking down, chicken searing. I decided to do the streams a little bit differently. Normally, I do a magical hand wave and kind of skip through a lot of the more, I guess the word is progress of like as it's cooking. But I didn't like it. I didn't like where that was bringing the stream. So I'm trying this one a little bit differently. There are very few times today where I will actually do a magical hand wave. There was one instance where I made a larger batch of something and it ended up having to cook down a lot. So I did skip through that because it took a while, because I quadrupled the recipe, and it kind of added a bit too. So I underestimated how thick the breast meat is, because again, I don't usually cook with breast meat. And since I'm going to be slicing it, I decided to just stab the hell out of it. My tongs are surprisingly sharp for what they are. So I just kind of stabbed a little bit, so when I flip it, it'll let the heat go into the meat a little bit easier without too much of an issue. The mushrooms, when I was cooking them, my goal was to get a little bit of a sear on them. Everyone kind of has their own different goals or mindsets when it comes to certain things, but I really like a mushroom with a nice good sear. So I had just gotten that color on the mushrooms, I put 2 fistfuls of flour into there, which I know is a really bad measurement, but that's really all I went with. That is a quarter stick of butter and the equivalent in oil. You just give it a good stir. It almost immediately absorbs all the fat. You don't want this to cook for too long on the heat. While you do add milk and it can scrape the bottom up, if you're a little too slow with it, it will burn the flour onto it, and burnt flour isn't really the best flavor. You want to add your liquid slow. If you add it all at once, it is not the most fun thing to deal with. If you have room, if you know your measurements, which because again I'm eyeballing a recipe for the first time, I did not. You can get warmer milk or room temperature milk, and it will come together a little bit easier. If it's cold, it'll kind of won't be the easiest. But again, if you add it slowly and stir it well, it's not a problem. For this, because I was making a sauce and not just, sorry, I was making a pasta sauce and not a steak sauce, that is some of the water from cooking the pasta. So when I poured the pasta out, I just poured a good bit into a measuring cup and set it to the side, and then just made sure to add that to it. And because it's now very watery, I'm just making sure that the flour is spread through everything and bring up the temperature to kind of get it to reduce a little bit. So now my chicken, which is on a medium-high heat, has been going very nicely. I finally have some good color on it. Just give it a nice little flip. You can see the bits that kind of come out of the liquid that come out of the chicken. I really don't know what other word to call that, because I don't really think about it as consider it stuff to scoosh to the side and then not use. But that's pretty much what I did. I moved it out of the way a little bit, flipped my chicken, and let it go for a little bit. If you've ever cooked with milk on a stove, you want to make sure that you stir that pretty regularly. You can let it sit for a little bit, but especially with flour, it'll kind of form a layer at the bottom, and then what will happen is it'll insulate it. So the bottom of your pot will get really hot, and then not hit noodle, and then not go past that layer. So what was happening was the mushrooms were sticking to it and then getting hot. So if you don't stir it, then the mushrooms will burn, and then everything else will slowly come up to a boil. So if you have your heat up really high, it's a little deceptive on when you should start doing things, because you're like, oh, just wait till it gets to a simmer. Well, then by the time it's getting to a simmer, it's because the heat has gone through this layer that's formed at the bottom. And that has caught me a couple times. Oh goodness. I feel like I'm slowly choking on on my stuff, my body. Ooh, sorry. I have delicious hydrating water, and it is helping. That's making me stop every once in a while. I don't like that. So this, I feel, is more fancy. Pretty much everything is fast today. There are levels of prep that need to be done for some of them. If you missed it, this one I started with pre-sliced mushrooms because it was the same cost as whole mushrooms, and I knew I was cooking it that day, and I wanted to be a little less fancy, you know. So when you're adding flour to something, you definitely want to whisk it. Something hot, sorry. You want to whisk it unless you really want dumplings. It's up to you if you want to do that. Cornstarch, I would never add it like that. You always make a slurry first, but with flour, it's not as important. But this one, like, again, there's different levels that you could do for a date night. if you seared your chicken first and set it to the side, and then cook some nice fancy mushrooms that you have diced up already, and then do your cream sauce, get it nice and good, add your chicken last minute, and then serve that over pasta, you could pull that off as like super fancy. I would definitely put this in more of the date night nudes. The other topic that I haven't talked about yet is picking the type of noodle that you want for your dish. You want to think about how you want your dish to interact with the pasta. And it's a really weird, like, thought process in, like, most of the time, pasta's pasta. Well, if you have, say, angel hair, which we'll be using later, you really want that for a really light sauce. It's going to just barely stick to it. Like a good garlic butter sauce would go really good with angel hair. It'd be just enough to cover it. You can get a little bit of flavor, and it's just nice. The American idea of spaghetti and meat sauce is like fundamentally flawed in that concept. That you don't want this nice little thin noodle with this big meaty hearty red sauce. It's just not the right shape to hold the kind of sauce you're putting on it. For this, if it was just a cream sauce and chicken, I would consider the a spaghetti or an angel hair or a fettuccine. But because I'm adding the mushrooms, I want something to also help hold the mushrooms. So I personally picked bow tie. Specifically mini bow tie because that was in my closet. But, I wanted to have something that had a nice wide area that would match the mushrooms, but not have too many ridges or holes to hold in too much of the cream sauce. To give a mild, or not a mild, to give you an update of what is happening right now, those 4 pieces are a lot thinner than the other 2. So while I'm cutting these up, I made sure to put the thicker pieces, just cut them up a little bit so the inside was showing, and then put that surface that I just cut down on the heat so it could finish up. But yeah. So again, if you have a hearty, meaty sauce, like a good red sauce with like chunky tomatoes and meat and stuff, then what you would want would be something with ridges or holes or like tubes that would help hold that sauce against your or with your pasta. And if you have a thicker sauce but it doesn't really have any pieces, then you want to look for more like the spirals kind of thing, where it doesn't really have too many ridges but it has like ways to hold the sauce in. And there's no like, well, at least for me, there's no specific, oh, you're cooking this and you need to use this kind of noodle. It's more of like the mindset of how much you want to come along with what you're cooking. For these recipes, for the most part, this one uses the bow ties, like I was saying. The other recipes that we'll get to are lighter sauces. So for most of those, I did angel hair, I believe. I'm trying to think what I got. Pretty sure I used angel hair for the other ones. The other ones are much lighter sauces. Well, this one, it's a very creamy, delicious mushroom. Yeah, mushroom chicken pasta. There we go. And then with this stir, the last little bit of chicken has finished. But as I was saying before, all the mushrooms and stuff had stuck to the bottom and insulated and was starting to get really hot. So as I stirred, all that steam that came up was that bit of or that heat coming off the bottom and then like instantly evaporating. So just be mindful of how often you stir stuff when it doesn't look like it's really cooking, because sometimes you'll just burn the whole bottom of your stuff, and it's just sad. Make sure to get all the little bits. So, do I do it right away? Yeah, I do. Okay, cool. You want to make sure to save all of that delicious flavor. You could use white wine for this. I had pasta water still, but you want to deglaze your pan and get all the good crispy chicken off of there. And you can just scrape it a little bit. Always use a wooden spoon on nonstick. Unless you really hate your pan or yourself, then you could use metal. But I'm sure there's some type of like vigilante out there that'll actually hunt you down if you do that. As you can see, it was pretty close to burning, so I'm very glad that I caught it when I did. But just a nice good deglaze. Not only does this add more flavor to your sauce, this is a little bit less that you then have to clean up because you're not scraping your pan. Or scrubbing your pan, sorry. It adds a little bit of color too. You know, it's not just a nice cream. Yeah. Oh. And also, you know, when it comes to like seasoning everything, I usually wait until the very end, especially on a new recipe. Sometimes you can add things as you go. I definitely pre-season portions of this, but like when you're cooking stuff down, my phone is not muted. Let me get that real fast. Doop, doop, doop. There we go. Seasoning. If you're cooking something down, this is for anything. If you pre-season and then reduce it by half, you've made a mistake. If you partially season with salt certain things, especially if like onions or something that you're kind of cooking the moisture out of, if you put an amount of salt, just some, then you'll kind of use the osmosis action of the liquid going to the saltier side to help bring everything out and help cook that liquid out. So that's a kind of a different thing, but even then you have to be careful how much you're adding. You know, and sometimes like pre-made stocks or concentrates, if you don't get like the sodium-free stuff, those can be surprisingly salty. Sometimes just adding a good like thickened stock as a seasoning is more than enough to finish it off. So always make sure you taste your food and season towards the end. I know that seems really obvious, but as I've said before, I will never assume the cooking experience of my viewers because, you know, some people just learn how to cook. I mean, some people don't really have the opportunity and they finally get to it later in life and they're just not really sure little things. And a lot of the stuff you kind of learn through experience if you don't have someone to teach you. So I can only hope that people can learn a little something while they're visiting. But, you know, might as well try to spread the love of food. I've always loved cooking for people. When it comes to, like, at a restaurant, there's a process of, like, oh, how to word it. I really don't like cooking for customers. I like cooking for family and friends. The process of me getting frustrated in restaurants kind of killed restaurant working for me. I would rather bust my ass for a friend and make amazing food than do a single shift at a restaurant, honestly. It's just a whole different thing. I can't feel the love, if you will, compared to doing it now. But yeah, this recipe came out really good for what it is. You know, like this is just a steak sauce that I turned into pasta. Yeah, I'm gonna plate it. Okay, I can remember. Again, I kind of redid my whole situation of how I was recording these, so I remember where I cut some of them off. But this is all meal prep for me. They reheated very nicely. Some sauces don't really take to being reheated. If you do, it's called Montebeurre, which I do later, and I like quadruple the recipe, so of course it broke because I was eyeballing everything. But basically, you have something that you've reduced down, and you put butter on the top right at the end, and you take it off the heat and just swirl it and let that butter melt in, and then it creates a buttery deliciousness. Doing that isn't really the best thing when reheating, but this sauce was surprisingly nice, especially for the type of cream sauces. Look at that. It is deliciously creamy. All that tasty chicken and mushrooms. It was very tasty. Okay, so that was mushroom chicken, sauteed mushroom chicken. Next, we'll do something a little different. We're gonna do a clam pasta. This one, okay. Well, let's get into it, and I'll kind of talk about it as it's going, because it's a different beast, if you will. So, first, again, I have all my hot stuff. I'm doing this one differently as a sauce to put on top of pasta instead of tossing it with. So we have all of our stuff ready. The original recipe was for half a stick of butter, and I jumped into it and put the whole stick in. So at some point I will be taking some of that fat out and then almost immediately putting it back in, because why not? So the original recipe called for a can of mushrooms, canned clams, a cream of asparagus, frozen peas and carrots, and a green onion. So that's all the clam juice, because I like using it. It's a nice flavor. I tried to make this a little bit fancier than what they did. So instead of using the canned mushrooms, I used some fresh mushrooms. If you've ever used canned mushrooms, they're not the worst. The process of canning cooks whatever is in it. You basically seal it in everything, and then heat it up really, really high, and then seal it, and then let it cool. So the process of canning does cook your food. But I wanted to be a little bit fancier. If this is that one that if you really wanted to, you could make very quickly at home with just some quick cans. You open up everything, dump it all in, and it's done. I tried to be a little bit nicer with it, mostly because I didn't have canned mushrooms, but also because I wanted to be a little fancier with it. I'll say more because I want to be fancy with it. I could have gotten the mushrooms if I really wanted to, but here we are. I had some garlic ready for another recipe, so I'm just gonna use the flat of my blade and kind of smash it a little bit. Do nice little slices one way, and then you just turn it to the other way. And then with garlic, if you kind of like mush it a good bit, you get more flavor out of it immediately. If you're doing like a longer slow cook, you can throw in whole cloves, and the flavor will slowly get out, less chance of it burning and stuff like that. So what you can do is, once you do that, you just smash it again and just slide your blade across the whole thing. And if you wanted to, you could keep chopping it and make it more of a paste, but with that, this will be fine. So we just add that into the mushrooms and the green onions, which normally green onions you don't saute. They are traditionally more of a finishing touch, a nice little crunch. This recipe, they wanted an onion flavor without having like a really strong onion in it. So this is a whole bunch of green onions. I did kind of a thicker cut on them, so they're a little more chunky. And then I'm just sauteing them down the beginning to kind of get the flavor into the butter and all the oil and everything. So at this point is when I realized that I put too much fat in it in the beginning. So it's not sauteing so much as just soaking in a whole bunch of butter. So to kind of help it out a little bit, I'm going to take some of that fat out because, again, I put a whole stick and I should have put a half a stick. So that's all the butter that shouldn't have been in there. Because of all the pieces, I can't really pour it out. So I'm trying to gently reduce my butter. Again, learn from my mistakes. Always check a recipe. I think the last time I cooked this, I was a teenager, and I am most definitely not a teenager now. So, I should have kind of looked over a little bit more. But, whatever. It came out really good. My wife had this for lunch. She described it as very homey, like a more of a comfort food noodle. So, I'll take that. Especially since I wasn't really sure, since I did change the recipe up a little bit. But, yeah. And personally, I didn't even know they made cream of asparagus until I found this recipe. It's a very... I mean, it may be cream of mushroom, yeah, cream of chicken if you're a little more like, you hunt a little bit more. But apparently they make cream of mushroom. I saw cream of shrimp. I don't know. The condensed soups get weird sometimes if you like really hunt them down. So it called for half a cup of the mushrooms or peas and carrots, but because I was doing 4 servings and I like peas and carrots, I put about twice as much. My phone's yelling at me. And just kind of let it go. They were frozen. This is just frozen peas and carrots, but as I've said in the past, when you get frozen vegetables, those are usually almost immediately frozen. They're flash frozen. Um, there's very little time that they spend not how to word it. They don't sit around for long periods of times. They usually get sent to whatever facility is processing them, portioned out or chopped, and then immediately frozen. So while the freezing process will mess with certain vegetables, and not allow certain ways to be cooked, like if you get flash frozen onions, they're not going to be the same kind of crispiness because the freezing process will break all the cell walls, and it just doesn't allow it to be crispy anymore. Ooh, sorry. But with peas and carrots, yeah, especially when I'm going to cook them down, you don't really have that issue, if I wanted to have a crispier crunch to this, then yeah, you can dice some carrots up, but even then I would still use probably either canned peas or frozen peas. Probably frozen peas just because I like frozen vegetables for the reasons I just discussed. They just usually have a nice fresh flavor compared to canned. And again, like I was saying before, the canning process cooks. So if you're using canned peas, those have been cooked. They've essentially been boiled in the liquid that they're canned in. While frozen, they're immediately shucked, portioned out, and flash frozen. So I have all that down. It's been cooking for a little bit. I think it's still frozen a touch. So I'm just kind of prepping what I'm going to be adding to it. If you've never bought canned clams, there's not very much in those cans. I was caught off guard because it's been quite a while since I've dealt with them. But as you'll see in a moment, compared to like canned tuna, where almost the entire can is full, maybe like 3/4 of the can, has some food in it. With this, it was close to 1/4 to 1/5. So it kind of caught me off guard again. How much was in it? So 3 of these cans fit into 1. So instead of having to deal with it later, I just kind of portioned it up now. I wanted a difference in size, so 2 of the cans are diced and 2 are minced. Or chopped and minced. Yeah, that's what it is. While there is definitions for mince and stuff like that as far as like an actual physical size, As you can see, the chop is very rough. There's some that are very large and some that are very small. So, sorry, I'm having flashbacks to the classes that I had where I was actually graded on my knife skills. We would go and buy potatoes in our downtime and just sit there and cut them because one of the cuts is an actual 1-inch cube, like perfect, and then the next one is half an inch and then 1/4 inch, and the professor would go around with a little plastic thing and hold your cut next to it and look at the size difference. It was very silly. And we had a lot of mashed potatoes at the end of the days during that, just because it's the only thing you use them for when you're just chopping potatoes endlessly. So, because I added all this other stuff to it, I decided to add that butter that I had taken out back in. I probably should have only added half. Looking at how it turned out, it was a little... the fat did separate a little bit out of everything, but for the process of cooking this, I kind of liked having that extra bit of fat. It helped bring the moisture out of the clams and kind of cook off some of the juice, and the frozen vegetables still had a good bit of moisture in it. So again, I'm trying to cook it down and get a little bit more some of that liquid out. So by doing that, I was able to achieve that result, and I kind of, again, came out really good. The amount of everything as far as ingredients had a nice ratio to it. I like my vegetables, so extra peas and carrots, can't really go too wrong with that. Again, I really wish that they put more clams into those cans, because it's not the cheapest thing. Like a can of clams is about half again as much as like a can of tuna, but you're getting so much less. It's just a little sad. Ooh, sorry. Again, slowly dying. Get some water real fast. Ooh, there we go. Sorry. So, to reconstitute my sauce, because I don't want to just pour this in there and have a condensed goopiness, and also to help clean out the can, I'm using the clam liquid from the cans. There's so many C's. I'm working my enunciation today. Just kind of probably put a little too much effort into it, but I wanted to waste the least amount as possible. I just kind of put it right in there. So that was about a half of the can of the clam juice. And then, to make sure that it's not too fishy, because this is being reheated, this is like lunch for my wife, and I really want her to become the subject of ridicule at her work. I have some pasta water still hanging around, which is probably the best neutral thing you can add to a pasta sauce to help bring it together. Because you add a little bit of that starch from the pasta. It's not just water, you still have a little bit of flavor and all that. But at the same time, we're here for the clams. Yeah, there it is. So, that was probably, with that addition, a little bit less than a can of the clam juice. And then just put it together. I want to say... This might be one of the times that I did my magical hand wave to kind of let it cook down, because it does get a little watery, but also I wanted to have all the vegetables and everything kind of cook together and be able to bring their flavors out. So this one is more of a home style comfort food, but also very quick, because you can put all this out of cans. You can get canned mushrooms, frozen peas and carrots, all your canned stuff, dump it in, and call it a day. My wife did comment that with the amount of salt that I just added, it still needed it a little bit more. So don't forget to season for the pasta that you're adding to, or season your pasta individually. Little column A, little column B. But always remember that whenever you're seasoning individual pieces, to not miss any of it. You want to make sure that everything that you're putting in is accounted for when you're doing salt. And I mean, everyone has their own taste too. Like, I know the way that I season, my mom always fussed at me for the amount of salt that I put in stuff. So, different people, different tastes. But once everything's together, you can kind of see there's a little bit too much fat in there. So I could have done a little bit less butter. I realized this was gonna simmer for a bit, so I let it go for maybe 5 minutes, and I was gonna save you guys from watching 5 minutes of simmering. So let's see. There we go. Magic wave. Boop. 5 minutes of simmering. It's now nice and thick. Everything's cooked down just a little bit more, and the flavor is all nice. This is then just served right on top of pasta. I probably could have done a different pasta with it. I had angel hair cooked and ready, and that's what the recipe originally called for, so I decided to go with that. But it probably would go pretty good on like just good elbow noodles. Maybe a penne to kind of be able to hold everything. I'm always a fan of shell noodles, probably one of my favorites. But even with that, I don't know, a cream sauce. Bow ties would probably be pretty good with it too. Anyway, yeah. It's nice and chunky. Good home style flavor. And there you go. So, for the next one, let's see what we got. We will do... We'll do this one. The next one we're going to look at is hummus pasta, which is an interesting concept. When I saw the recipe, these three, there we go, plate please, okay. I was very intrigued by the mindset that it had. So, for this, hello, you want your pasta ready to go, the kind of vegetables that you want, some hummus, and onions and garlic, and the white wine, tasty white wine. So, oh, and chicken, right, I forgot we did chicken with this too. Our pans are already hot because, you know, do everything. It's about medium-high for both. A little bit of oil, as always, oil and butter, usually better than just butter. Less burning, you know. I don't know if anyone would recognize it, but the hummus that I'm using is from my last stream, I believe, or the stream before that. You know, and whatever you're gonna put into it, you want to add the type of vegetables and such to complement the type of hummus you're going to use. So if you're doing a very plain hummus, you know, you can kind of go more whatever you want with the vegetables. The hummus I'm using is a homemade Mediterranean style, which really is sun-dried tomatoes and some olives and a bunch of Italian seasoning, as loosely as that fits Mediterranean style. But you know, that's what I was aiming for when I was making it. The chicken was pre-seasoned with salt, so I think I'm just putting raw chicken in with no seasoning at all. And I wanted to kind of complement those flavors. So I got some good cherry tomatoes, as you saw. I'm going to slice up some spinach, onions and garlic, because, I mean, it's onions and garlic. And mushrooms, because I like mushrooms. So my pan was preheated a touch too much. So we pull that off. That is a one full onion. They were kind of small, so it didn't all make it in. Is that a full onion? That's a half an onion. I lied to you. I apologize. You can see that's how hot it is. I almost immediately started browning. I remembered I wanted to add a bit of butter to that, so there we go. The butter was more for flavor than, yeah, of course, than like for the cooking process, I suppose. Because I mean, you know, sauteing butter is always good, but I just wanted a little bit of a buttery flavor to it. So, never be afraid to pull your pan off the heat. Like I've said it in the past, but I have watched people just stare at a pot burning after they've turned it to low and it's still too hot, with just a look of sadness. Like, just move your pot. If it's hot enough, it'll keep cooking off. If you know, taking it off the heat is going to ruin your dish, I have no idea what you're cooking. There are very few things that just taking off the heat for a minute to help not burn it is going to really mess it up, and nothing really comes to mind, honestly. But, that was a very large clove of garlic. There's one of those huge ones on the outside. I kind of had everything prepped. This one, I would put... You could either do this as a date night one. Like, there's a lot of fancy things. You can talk to your date while you're prepping all the different little things. You can have it all ready to go beforehand, and then kind of like talk to them this way, or talk to them while you're doing this particular portion. Sauteing onions and garlic in a house is like one of the best ways to make it as tasty. To make the house smell really nice. So, you know, I would put this in more of the fancier category. Law. Oh my goodness. How are you guys doing? What's up, Doofus? That felt weird to say. How you doing, Goblin? Oh man, this is probably the most people I've ever had in this stream. By like a lot. Nick, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Hey, Bigby. What's up, Merlin? Melon, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. We're making hummus chicken, hummus pasta chicken. Cheddar, thank you. So the cinnamon is for next week. I'll be honest. Derek's, thank you. I appreciate all you guys so much. So sorry, the nude stream. We just have a little bit of onion and garlic that we sauteed in a touch of butter and oil. Once the onions got a little deliciousness, we added mushrooms and tomatoes just now, and a touch of salt. How's your birthday going, Law, by the way? Oh, has it been fun? How was Uno? I was watching for a while, and then I had to stop because, you know, I was streaming, and my internet, it will not let me have 2 tabs of Twitch open, or even right now my wife is having to watch a DVD because if she were to put on a random television show on streaming, it would completely crash my stream. Thank you, Marilyn. Yeah, so this one's definitely more of like the fancier recipes. I would put this in the date night category because cooking this made my house smell amazing. Adorable little noodle all up in my way. Ooh, excuse me. I am slowly dying, so I apologize for me randomly having to mute myself so I don't cough into everyone's ear as I waste away. Yeah, this noodle. Noodle's probably my favorite. I guess this is the stream to have noodle in the most. But yeah, sorry. This is so distracting, and I wasn't expecting it. and now I'm feeling really self-conscious and awkward because that's the kind of person I am. So chicken, just salt and pepper, nothing too fancy. If you wanted to get fancy with it, if you have like a seasoning or a certain type of hummus that you're using, you know, change it up a little bit. I'm I'm only trying to give you the basic idea to help you do what you want with it. Because the idea of this is unique, of just using hummus with some pasta water and making a sauce. And I really wanted to give it a try. It came out amazing. Um, the hummus that I used is one that I made in a previous stream and kind of had left over in the house, uh, with sun-dried tomatoes and olives in it and Italian seasoning. And it was really good, but we weren't eating it fast enough. So by doing this, I was able to utilize it and make sure that it didn't go to waste. Um, as far as what's in the pot right now, I'm kind of just cooking the tomatoes down, letting a lot of the moisture cook out so it doesn't really cause too much of an issue. Noodle. Um, and just kind of going with it. And then the fettuccine went really well with it. Again, I've been talking about different shapes of pasta, but I did like the fettuccine with it. It was just thick enough to kind of hold the sauce on and kind of keep all the little bits together. But yeah. Yes. So my setup is a chest-mounted GoPro. Um, Unfortunately, the original idea was to do this all live. Um, but I found out once it arrived, GoPro does not have the best um, live setup. So all of this now is pre-recorded. It does allow me to be able to talk with chat, which is nice. I would not have been able to be as uh, what's the word? Be able to talk as much. Yeah, so Noodle, um, she's a year old. We we went outside one day, and she randomly ran up to us and started just being really shy. And our neighbor has had about two or three dogs where they didn't really close the gate well enough. So they would kind of get out in the front yard. So we're just like, oh, hey, the neighbor got another dog. That's cool, whatever. Well, 3 days go by. This dog kept coming around, and we were just like, we want a second dog. I want a dog just like this one. It would be really cool to get another little Dutch hound like this. Um, so one day, someone knocks at the door, and it's these two ladies about my age, maybe like late 20s, 30s kind of thing. And they're just holding her. And they're like, "Is this your dog?" And I was like, "No, I'm pretty sure it's the neighbor's." Hold on, wait. Like, if you're saying that, then that means that you've kind of checked everywhere. And she's like, "Yeah, we've been down this whole area. You're the last house in the block, and we just wanted to see if you knew whose dog this was." And I was like, "Well, I'll be honest. My wife wants a dog. If no one's claiming her, then we'll take her." So from that day on, she was part of the family. We did a dice roll on her name, so her full name is Noodle Strudel. Um, and the vet was saying when we brought her to the vet for the checkup, apparently it's a thing where people will bring animals that they don't want anymore into neighborhoods. Like if your dog has puppies or whatever, and you don't want to care for them all, no one's adopting them. You go to a neighborhood, put a collar on it with no tag, and then just leave them on the street. And that's what someone had done. They just had left her with collars so she wasn't picked up by animal control, but there was no tag on it. So since then, Noodle's been part of the family. She gets just chased around constantly by our 2-year-old. Our older dog, Lexi, is slowly getting used to her still. But she's been with us for about 3 months now. Yeah, and it was really sad, but at the same time, we got a puppy. So we're pretty happy with the end result, but the process of her being abandoned and everything kind of has left her a little nervous. Yeah, I love Noodle. She's not. No, she didn't make it in the room. Normally she'll come hang out with me. But Lexi's here. Hey, Lexi. But yeah, I love that dog. And I never realize how much he's around me when I'm cooking until I stream. There's Lexi. Um, but they have enough, like, don't get kicked usually to kind of move out of my way so I don't notice them as much. But they're my favorites. Lexi's my original girl. She was, oh god, she was part of the family for quite a while. There's a whole story there. But first, deglaze with white wine. Get all the tasty chicken flavor out. As you saw me add all of that hummus into the pan. Let the spinach kind of cook down a little bit. And a little bit of pasta water to kind of bring it together. So from that, I'm also going to, I'm pretty damn sure I'm about to add just some white wine into the pan. But with that extra hummus, I needed to add some more liquid and make sure it's a nice sauce. Just kind of bring it back up to temperature again and let it cook a touch. The spinach in particular, I wanted to make sure it cooked down a bit and became part of the sauce properly. Yeah. There we go. And then just give it a good stir and let it heat back up. Oh my goodness, it's cut in a weird way. So I don't know how to pronounce that. Xenos the Knight. I said Knight. I feel dumb. Thank you for the follow. Oh my god. You guys are great. What's up, Xenos? Yeah, I need to extend my thing because it keeps cutting the names the weird way. And I don't like it. And I can't read it because I'm like half dyslexic, half stupid. So I constantly mess up people following me and I feel so bad. But yeah. What was I saying? Oh, Lexi. Lexi has an interesting story behind her. So my youngest sister, oh Jesus, like almost 10 years ago, probably closer to 8, but still, randomly brought a very small dog home. I'm talking like can fit in 2 hands little puppy. She then went out of town and left it with a friend to watch while she was out because we're all living at my mom's place at the time because I was real young. And while she was out, her friend's mom decided that she had bonded with this dog, and the dog was hers, and refused to give this puppy back to my sister, who I want to say was 15 or 16 at the time. This is a fully grown 40-year-old woman stealing a dog from a child. And it was her friend's mom, and to avoid it causing major issue, she kind of just went, well, okay, and didn't really make a fuss about it. She went back to the seller of the dog that she got the puppy from originally, and was just like, hey, the first one's in a good home, but I want a dog. Can you give me another dog? So that second dog was Lexi. If you've ever been around young people with animals that also live with their parents, what actually happened was my mom got a new dog. So Lexi lived with my mom for years. And when I moved, I left the state and then came back. And when I came back, I lived briefly with my mom while I was looking for an apartment and getting back on my feet. And we were talking about picking up another dog that we could get for this really small apartment. And my mom was just like, well, why go shopping for a new dog when you could just have Lexi? She's the perfect size for for an apartment. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna say, hey, can I have your dog, Mom? But like, if you're willing to let us adopt Noodle, then or Noodle, let us adopt Lexi, then of course we'll take her. We're not gonna say no. We love this dog. So from then on, Lexi's been part of our family. It's my wife's first dog that she'd ever got to be a part of, and I love her. She is easily my favorite. She's an old bitch. She takes nothing from no one. She actually has a scar on the top of her head where she decided that she was the top dog, and the bulldog that she was having this conversation with disagreed. And we're still amazed to this day that she stood up like that and tried to get into a fight with a bulldog. But yeah, so from there, I really just portioned it out and put chicken on top. As that hard cut showed, I tried to explain it. Sorry, I was all up in that story. But that's really all it did. Cooked down the sauce a bit, tossed it with pasta, and pulled it right off the heat. The second it was mixed, I moved it off the heat, portioned it out, and put chicken on top. And that is hummus chicken pasta. We have two more. Let's see. We'll do this one next. Wait, no, I have to do it this way. So the next recipe is caramelized onion pasta. I don't do the entire process of caramelizing onions because that is a lengthy thing sometimes. But let's get into it. There we go. Alright, again, our stuff is hot. We are doing a 6 portion because I'm making it for a whole bunch of people. So that is 6 whole onions that are all chopped down. I'm putting a full stick of butter in there with a little bit of oil. Since it's that hot, I'm immediately jumping into it kind of aggressively. And you're caramelizing onions, picking the type of onion for, how do you word it? The type of onion that you pick will kind of change how it works. A white onion caramelizes very, very nicely, but it takes longer because there's less sugar. I'm going through all the pieces, sorry. That's a bunch of Parmesan. I have a little bit of white wine, those noodles, and the pasta water. But picking your onions kind of changes how to approach it. White onions are much more... I hate to use the word onion flavored, but it's much more traditional what you would think of as an onion. If you use a yellow onion, there's more sweetness into it, there's more sugar. So it's a little bit milder, but it will also caramelize better because that's what you're doing. Caramelization is just browning the sugars in the food. So depending on how fast you want it to go, there are a couple different cheats that you can do. If you're doing it low and slow, then you're in for the long haul anyway. But if you add salt like this to your onions, you bring out a lot of the water from inside of the onion and let it caramelize that way. How to word it? You get the water out so that it's just sugar and... sorry, I know like better wording it, but it's an interesting process, so I'm trying to think how to explain it. You use osmosis with the salt on the outside and cook the water off faster, which then allows the sugars to caramelize quicker because the water will inhibit that process. There, that's the way I want to word it. So the way that you can make it go faster, though, is by adding sugar. So that's what I did. I did not show it because I did it in the middle of cooking it down like a dummy, but I just put a nice spoonful of sugar onto the top and stirred it in, and then that's enough to kind of get the caramelization going. So because I am still cooking on high heat, you want to cook or stir this very often. This is one of those situations that barely paying attention will cause you to mess up your onions. And the line between caramelization and burning is just enough that it'll mess with you. But all that creaminess is really just the full stick of butter that I added, and the sugar kind of combines with that and makes I guess a glaze is the right word. The other thing you can add, if it's suitable for the recipe, is to add honey. You're technically just adding sugar, but it's a very different flavor. If you're doing something like French onion soup or anything with that type of flavor profile, you can add honey to the onions and let it cook down with that, and it will do the same kind of thing. It'll help you caramelize a little bit faster, and it adds a nice deep sweetness to it. That's very, very nice. And it complements the Gruyere cheese. That sounds right. I'm pretty damn sure it's Gruyere. It's been a while since I've made a French onion soup. Although we are going to do something similar for next week. It's a French onion pasta bake to get you hyped about that. But that's later. I haven't even cooked it yet. But again, you just want to make sure this is stirred really well. I want to say the amount of cheese I'm going to put into it initially was about 6 ounces of Parmesan. But because I was doing a 6 times the initial recipe, I pulled out my grated Parm and kind of mixed the fancy with the fast a bit. I can't really recommend using the really finely grated. Like a good shred is probably better for this. It melts better. The grated one doesn't so much melt as like dissolve. It just does different. It's the best way to word it. Parsley. This is in the fancy category. So, if you've ever tried to do a fancy parsley topping, it doesn't really come out the right way. The chlorophyll in the parsley will make it very moist and sticky. And also, if you pick... alright, how to word it. The fancy curly leaf parsley has almost no flavor. But a good flat leaf parsley will actually bring something to a dish. It's still a very mild flavor, but it has a flavor. The curly leaf stuff is pretty much exclusively for that thing of leaf you put onto the dish with like a slice of tomato to make it look fancy. Which, to be fair, I haven't seen in a very long time. That was a very much 90s, early 2000s thing that maybe someone still does. I haven't really seen it in quite a long time. But the trick to getting a good parsley topping is actually to rinse it. It feels weird the first couple times you do it because you would imagine that by rinsing parsley, you're making it very wet. Because you're putting it in water. But you either want to get a towel or cheesecloth, preferably a towel that you don't mind possibly staining green. You don't want the thickest thing. You want to make sure that it's not a microfiber or anything else that like really holds on or has like a bad texture. I want to say bad, rough texture. We'll go with that. You can use stems if you're going really fine. Again, when I was doing knife skill tests, we spent 15 minutes straight of doing nothing but mincing parsley to get it as fine as possible. It was a pain. But anyway. So again, whenever you're doing this kind of thing with onions, make sure that you remember to stir. If you're not the best at timing yourself, set a timer on your microwave or phone or whatever. maybe, I would say no more than 3 minutes. 3 minutes is probably pushing it. Um, but you can leave it alone. It'll help the caramelization go a little bit faster. It may not be as even, but as far as getting the flavor, it'll definitely do the job. I do not throw those stems away. There is still a good bit of flavor, but I only needed about a fistful of parsley, which is what that is. And those stems you can throw into a stock and do a nice vegetable stock and add just a little bit more flavor to it. If you've never really done a chop like this, you want to do a rocking motion. A portion of your blade is always touching. You're never lifting it completely up unless you're readjusting your position. I didn't realize how janky this would make the camera as I was doing it, because I was totally in cook mode. But you're just kind of doing that. You're making it into a nice little pile, rocking your blade over the bulk of it. If you are getting to a point where you're satisfied with how big your pieces are, and you find like one or two just enormous pieces, take them out. Like, at that point, it's so much easier to just take out the pieces that are messing with it than trying to find every big piece and chop it down to the small. Feels like a really obvious thing when you say it out loud, but when you're in the mindset of like, I need this much parsley, I need to chop it, sometimes you just don't really think about it. I know I personally didn't think about it the first 2 or 3 times, and I would just sit there and just chop over and over, trying to get this one or two big pieces down to everything else. But in the process of doing this, you can do everything. If you have the stems in it, you can still do this. It still has that good flavor, but you're going to want to chop it a lot more. Like, spending 10 to 15 minutes just doing this is tedious as hell, but it does make everything look the same. And if you're going to try to make a bunch of fancy dishes, might be worthwhile. You can do this beforehand if you're doing a date, and kind of just have it in a spot so they don't have to watch you just chop a bunch of greens. Personally, I was going for a little bit rougher, so with that I called it. I kind of just found one of my towels. My dish towels I'm kind of satisfied with the texture to be able to do this. Cheesecloth is not the cheapest thing, so I never really get it because I have enough towels to kind of be okay with pouring stuff through and straining things. Yeah. When we moved in, I'm going to get to it eventually. Yeah, this drawer. This drawer was just full of stuff. Almost none of that is mine. Yeah, that is not mine. I love it. I probably could have used it for what I was about to do, but I like it a bunch. So, eventually I'll stop bending over and giving you the patented GoPro crotch shot. There we go. Let's make a little hand. Put as much of the parsley as you can right in the middle. What am I doing? Why am I being awkward about this? Oh, I was setting it down. Sorry. Again, this is all pre-recorded, and sometimes I do weird things, and I can't remember what the state of mind I was in at the time. It's not the easiest thing to see, but because I added sugar, that coating on the onion sticks to the bottom, so you have to make sure that you scrape it. Again, some of the things seem obvious, but when you're in the mood, in the moment, you may not notice little things like that. It'll catch you off guard when all of a sudden stuff's burning. So, grab it, make sure you get all the corners, which took me a touch. And you just give it a nice good wet. Make sure that the inside actually gets wet. You kind of just give it a couple little half squeezes. And then just a nice good twist. You can see all that green coming off. Do it a couple different times. Usually 2 is good. If you really want to get it, you know, do it as much as you want. The go-to is you basically go until the water runs clear. But even with those 2, and again, always make sure you do your little scrapies. Even with those 2 rinses, it came out really nice. Just doing a squeeze like that actually is enough to dry it out for being able to do a sprinkle on the top, as you'll see whenever I'm done with my onions. There we go. Open it back up. One last check to make sure it's all dry or squeezed out, and then just dump it right out. Oof, excuse me. Again, probably could have used a different towel, but this one worked pretty fine. This is probably the worst case scenario, just a basic towel. You will lose a little bit. You want to rinse that off before you wash it. So you don't end up with green all in your stuff, but it dried up really nice. And then you have a nice little fancy sprinkle topping. With that took just enough time for me to be content with where my onions got. So I'm going to add a little bit of butter to the end to help make my cheese sauce. So that's about a tablespoon of butter. Let's throw it on in. Save the last little bit. There we go. Pick up while you're cooking. And yep, come on. Eventually, add some cheese. So I have, again, Parmesan cheese. If you want to get really fancy, you can do a mixture of Parmesan and Reggiano. But get your butter to melt down. And then, because the bottom is starting to cook to it, just do a nice deglaze with white wine. I'm adding probably about a half a cup, maybe a little bit more of white wine. And then just giving it a nice good scrape and making sure everything's off at the bottom. I made a mistake during this recipe. Right here, I should have added pasta water, because that is not enough liquid to cover the amount of pasta that I'm about to add to it. So you want to kind of mentally look at what you're about to add, and that is nowhere near enough. And because I then add all of this delicious cheese, well, I save a little bit. You gotta have some fancy on the top, right? I add all this cheese to it, and then make a very good sauce that right then would have been very good for a much smaller amount of pasta. But because I'm adding about a full package of fettuccine, I believe is what I'm using. Angel hair? That's angel hair. That is not nearly enough. And I jumped the gun and immediately added all of my pasta. Well, so as I try to decide how to deal with this, if your pasta doesn't want to break apart when you're trying to add it, just add a little bit of water to it. It's a weird little thing that, because you saw how much water I added, but you can't see how much is coming out. Not nearly even a third of the water I put in actually came out. So it will kind of add a little bit more moisture to your stuff. Obviously, you're adding water to it, but it helps your pasta not be really clumpy. And at this point, I realized I messed up. It's not coating everything. It's very cheesy and thick. And I should have added that water sooner. Before I added the cheese. Brought it back up to temperature and it would have been fine. As it stands, I then add lukewarm pasta water to a hot cheese sauce and immediately coagulated all the cheese onto this pasta. It was very sad, and I was very sad. At the end, it did work out. It is still tasty, but in the process, like, if I were to serve this immediately, I would have been very upset with how it came out. I guess I still am upset how it came out. But that is the lesson. Never add cold water to a cheese sauce with pasta already in it. It's not the most agreeable thing. But that's more or less the recipe. You caramelize onions, you deglaze with white wine, you add a bit of pasta sauce so you have a nice juiciness to it. Stir in your cheeses, or cheese, or whatever you want to add to it, and then give a nice little toss into the pasta. And then from there, we have tasty portion stuff. And that's just the last little bit of nice shredded cheese and the parsley that was on top. Let's bring up the last one, which is a scampi. This is most definitely on the fancy side. By definition, according to my very expensive cookbook, a scampi is a garlic butter and shrimp. And if you do other things with it, it's technically not a scampi anymore. But, you know, we're going to do a little different. So, we're only going to do the pan. This is, again, another sauce that we're going to pour over the pasta, which has already been portioned out into those containers over there. So, again, garlic butter. We're gonna do it in stages with the butter addition. And while that's melting, we're going to get the garlic ready. And once again, just because this is all recorded and I had different mindsets of everything, we're going to go through chopping garlic. So take your whole clove, give it a good crush with the side of your blade, and then the paper pretty much comes right off. Just take that little nub of where it joined to the rest of the bulb. All these have been pre-smooshed. Just do a nice little side choppage. For the amount that I ended up cooking, I probably should have doubled the amount of garlic I'm putting in. Like, this is one of those recipes that going heavy on garlic will not really mess with you too much. The seafood that I used for this is what I had available, which is a generic seafood mix of frozen. It has mussels, shrimp, squid, and octopus. It was the first time I ever saw something like that, so I decided to get a couple of bags of it, and this is the last of the bags that I had gotten. It's probably around 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds of seafood total. I enjoyed cooking with it. The shrimp, everything, the shrimp is kind of like parboiled a touch, so everything kind of is already a little bit there, so that's why this is, for me, a little more the fast than the fancy. But you can also just get nice, good, fresh shrimp and do this recipe. And it won't be an issue at all. So that's my butter and oil getting good. My garlic. I'm doing a very rough chop. And then a nice little smush to kind of help break it up and get that flavor in a bit more. If you really wanted to, you could run your knife through this a couple more times, and you add salt to it. Ooh, excuse me. Sorry, that caught me off guard. And then when you do the side swipe, the salt acts like a abrasive. It will mush it and get a nice, good, uh, almost paste. If you keep going, you will get a paste, but it will break up the garlic a lot more, and you'll get more flavor out faster. So if you're doing a very quick cook with garlic at a higher temperature, you don't want it to go as far. Getting it smaller and doing that the smash with salt will get more flavor out compared to, like, if you're doing a roast, you just throw whole cloves of garlic along the side, and you'll get more of a slow release, and your garlic won't burn, but you'll still get the flavor. So, get the garlic going. Once again, this is a recipe that will make your house smell amazing. It is. If you've never just put a whole bunch of garlic into butter in your house, it's better than any candle. It is such an amazing flavor. Scent? Flavor for your nose? I kind of like flavor for your nose. Instead of using black pepper for this, I went with crushed red pepper. It's a brand new bottle. Yes, that's me being stupid. There we go. It's a very different flavor. It goes very well with the butter and with the seafood. You do have to be careful because honestly, that stuff is quite hot. I put almost too much, but my scampi was quite spicy. So you don't really want the garlic to cook too much before you add everything because it's going to continue browning. So you add your seafood. Again, if you're a Puritan, you can add just your Purist. Puritan? Whatever. You can add just shrimp. You will sear one side, and when it looks good, you'll turn it to the other side. And when that looks good, you then take it out and go from there. Again, this is a nice little hodgepodge of different seafoods, so I can't really turn it individually, but it came out really good. Seafood and garlic butter, match made in heaven. With this, I want to try to cook off a little bit of the moisture, and because it's all previously frozen, there's still a good bit of moisture in the, especially the squid and octopus. Those hold water. You know what? All of it. Mussels hold a lot of water too. If you've ever dealt with those, they're very juicy. So I was trying to cook some of that out and make it more of a fat ratio and less of a everything else ratio. What am I doing? Oh, a spoon. Yeah. So when you are content with where your seafood is as far as being cooked, you want to take it out of the pan, add white wine to your butter garlic sauce, reduce it a little bit, and then the proper phrase is Montebeurre, but you take it off the heat, throw butter onto this new delicious wine sauce, and just swirl it. And that will melt the butter, incorporate it into a nice emulsion, and then you put your seafood and tomatoes, which is one of the things you do that will eventually reach this. Yep, there we go. Cook it for a little bit longer, and then serve it either by itself on just a plate, or put it directly onto pasta. I wouldn't really toss pasta into the thing as a whole. What you can do is toss the pasta into just the garlic butter, and then put that to the side, and then put the shrimp on top of it, maybe? That could work. Especially if you would toss it, most of it wouldn't leave, so you could still put the tomatoes and the seafood back in and then serve it that way. That wouldn't be too bad. I should have done that. But yeah. This is the fancy side of it. You could easily just do a chopped up Roma tomato, but I had these nice little pretty cherry tomatoes. You may think that I'm being a little unsafe with my knife, and you wouldn't be completely wrong. You definitely want to watch your fingertips. There we go, the proper grip. The little cherry tomatoes, they're like running, so sometimes you just gotta hold it how you gotta hold it. And just make sure that your finger isn't under the blade. I know, I love tomatoes. I tried growing some this year. I have currently 4 dead tomato plants in my backyard because they did not take. But homegrown tomatoes, if you ever have the opportunity, are amazing. Stuff in the supermarket, it is, how to word it. What was that? Okay, sorry, something like hit my window. So the vegetables and food in general that you would get at the grocery store is usually very consistent in flavor. Your tomatoes have a very consistent flavor across every tomato. While homegrown tomatoes, there are some that are, yeah, that's always fun. There are some that will be much more flavorful, especially if you're the one picking them. You know, you never take them all at the same ripeness. So, like a beefsteak tomato has borderline no flavor. It's very rough. Roma, you kind of have more flavor in there, but it's very consistent and not very deep. But for a quick thing from a store, you know, it's probably one of the better ones for the price. But if you go and get like some good heirloom tomatoes, um, there's some good Kirin's that I love. I have the seeds right here, actually. Where are they? Are these them? Ooh, okay, there we go. Let's see. I have some pear tomatoes, an Amish paste. Ooh, Brandywine. That's the good stuff. If you see good Brandywine tomatoes, I strongly recommend picking them up. There is a flavor there that if you don't usually eat tomatoes is very different. Sketch, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. How you doing? How's your day been? Yeah, you joined us about halfway through doing a seafood scampi, which is the last recipe of the night, unfortunately, or evening, or day, or wherever you are in life and time zones. But essentially, you make a garlic butter, add a seafood, deglaze with wine, and serve over pasta. We're adding some tomatoes to it, which is what's there, what we were discussing, and go from there. So, again, meal prep. All my pasta's ready to go. Make sure that glass bottles are not within elbow range. It was very tasty. It's made the house smell amazing. This is one of the date nudes. I would say this could be a first date nude. Show your whoever you're trying to impress that you know how to make delicious seafood. Um, Everything's cooking down. Most of the moisture has kind of cooked off at this point, but there's still just a little bit. It doesn't show up too well on camera, but you can kind of look at it and you'll see the water compared to the oil whenever you're doing this. And you want to make sure that you don't have too much water in it. Now, if you're doing whole shrimp, like a proper scampi, you will not have that. Um, like there's very little moisture that'll come out of whole shrimp. What am I doing? Oh, I lost my phone. I'm pretty sure it's in my pocket. Yep, there it is. Um, so you don't really have to worry about that. You're just searing your shrimp, taking it right off. The squid and octopus and mussels will hold a lot of moisture, so it takes more time. Um, I don't regret it though. It tastes really good. But this whole process really just kind of letting it cook down a touch. I don't know if you may have missed it, but I did add a touch more of the red pepper flakes, doing a little bit of salt. I probably, in retrospect, should have added some salt to the pasta. And then because I wasn't really fully thinking, I added black pepper. Probably could have gone without that. It's not super spicy, but it definitely has some heat to it. Also, adding the salt earlier probably would have been a little bit better. This is like probably the third time I've mentioned it. Osmosis, bring the moisture to the surface out of the food. It evaporates faster. You then reduce your sauce a little bit quicker. What's better than a garlic butter with seafood? Garlic butter and seafood, a little bit of lemon. If you have fresh lemon, you can zest the lemon zest. It's really weird that they have the verb for it as what it gives you, but put a little bit of lemon zest in there, and then a nice little squeeze over everything. As you can see, Lorelai here is enjoying some noodles, being very silly with her bowl, and her plates. Her chairs. I know what objects are. Oh my god. But yeah, you want to add whenever you do deglaze. That's when you're going to be adding your lemon juice and everything. So, getting myself kind of cleaned up a little bit. Make sure I have the room to move around. That's what happens when you start batch cooking. You just make messes. There you go. Nice little holiday wine stopper. To talk wines for a moment. All of this, I've used a Chardonnay. It is probably the cheapest Chardonnay in the store, but it is one that I've cooked with multiple times during my my classes back in the day. It has a nice neutral flavor. It's not really dry, but it's definitely not sweet. I would not use a sweet wine for this, but maybe like a dry fruity wine or something like that probably would be pretty good too. Let's see. Pinot Grigio would probably be pretty good with this. Chardonnay is the go-to. It's like when you think of what type of white wine to add to a sauce, usually that's there. That also being said, there are wines that are just literally listed as white wine. They're either some kind of blend, or they have the general process of the type of winemaking. So the difference is if you let your grapes soak in with the skins. If you let the juice just run off and then you make your wine with that, then you'll end up with a white wine. If you let it sit for a little bit longer, you'll get a blush, and if you leave them in there, then you get a white wine. Or goddammit, a red wine. I know colors. So that's the difference with that. But seafood, white wine. Red meat, red wine. That's the usual break between the two when it comes to the type of wine you're using in cooking. The other thing I would say is don't cook with a wine that you wouldn't drink. Cooking wine, by at least in America at least, I'm unsure of the UK, by definition, has salt in it. It has enough salt that if someone were to eat it, drink it, they will become physically ill. So if you hear, like, Harry Potter joking about drinking cooking sherry, that woman is drinking salted wine and probably will die. Like, drinking enough will make you physically ill. And I cannot recommend it. This is going to be another one of our cuts, because this is usually when you do this, you would do it for 2 people. Doing it for 4 required this amount of wine to reduce quite a bit, and it took about, it was more than 5, but it was less than 10. So that was the cut there. I didn't realize I cut it at that particular part, but okay. I'd actually, the butter that I put in had melted, and then here I added more as it was, no? Hold on, wait. Oh, okay. Sorry. GoPro does this weird thing. We're at 18 minutes, it starts creating a new file. So that was the break between that. So I apologize for that misinformation just now. So while my wine is reducing, I add my tomatoes to add some of the flavor. This also adds some acidity. So kind of keep that in mind with how much tomatoes you're adding. The more you add, especially with the lemon juice, the more acidic overall your stuff will be. Mine, kind of a spicy, relatively acidic. I'm not gonna lie, but I like it. It's all kind of your flavors and what you like out of things. You want it really sweet. I would probably just hold off on the lemon juice or get a lemon and do it as a squeeze on the top. And then maybe just like a Roma tomato. Cherry tomatoes are... If I had just done red cherry tomatoes, it would have added a nice sweetness. But the yellow added a tartness to it also that was enough of a difference that you noticed. So just to keep it in mind, whenever you're choosing your ingredients like that, there are very big differences in some of the stuff. Because it's a butter sauce that I'm making, I decided to portion out my seafood now, especially since all of this is going to be reheated for me. If this was doing with shrimp as a proper scampi or for a date, I wouldn't do this. I would save it and mix it back in towards the end and then serve it. But we're portioning, so here we are. Get all that flavor. I didn't want to add straight butter. I wanted to do the butter sauce, so I tried to get as much of it back in there as I could. And then once it's all together, try not to lose too much of the tasty garlic bits. And then now we're just reducing wine. There'll be a moment I go a little too far. My wine sauce breaks. You want to catch it before that moment. That's kind of the best way to word it, is before your sauce breaks. But you get it down. This is, again, a little too much. I could have fixed this. If you add more wine and recook it down from there, you can then kind of start over. As it stands, it was late, and my sauce was going to break anyway because I was going to reheat it. So I just went with it, do a little Montbeurre action, which is you just take it off the heat, put in a little bit extra butter, and give it a stir. Then you have delicious, delicious buttery wine sauce. And then we just portion it. With this, because my tomatoes are still in there, I was trying to portion the tomatoes evenly across all that. But if you were doing this for 2 people, it would be a lot less. Your shrimp would be in it. You kind of just scoop it right on top of the pasta. You would want to make sure that your pasta is salted before you would do this. If you're the kind of person who really, really, really likes butter, you can take your pasta and toss it in the butter, put the pasta down, and then put your shrimp and everything on top. Thank you. I tried. The first couple of streams, or meal preps really that turn into streams, I was a little bit more rough, so I've been slowly picking up my portioning techniques to make sure that everything is nice and neat. And those little containers are really cheap. It's like $50 for $20. So if you ever consider doing meal prep, you save a lot of food. You don't have to worry about making sure you're missing anything, and it has stopped us from eating out several times. Today actually I was just like, do you think that if it would be a bad idea for us to go and get a burger today? And we're like, we got all the food at the house. So it's a good way to save money. You end up buying what you need for a week, You don't overcook, because if you do, so it's going bad. So it requires a bit of planning, but it's this one day or a part of a day of going through and making sure that you just kind of have everything ready. It's very convenient, and it is probably one of my favorite things when it comes to making sure that my wife eats. Is mostly for her. She has a bad habit of overworking and not eating while she's working. Yes, having food ready to go saves that little bit of time in the morning and makes sure that you have appropriate portions. It's great. I really have enjoyed doing the meal prep. Words are hard right now. My brain is slowly dying. Thank you for everyone who's hung out. Thank you for all of the followers. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day, you guys. Bye bye.